Hello and welcome to People Online. This is the third video in a series of presentations on competency-based HRM. The topic for today's presentation is behavioral event interviews. It would cover the basic concepts related to BEI, how we can conduct behavioral event interviews, codify BEI transcripts, and analyze BEI data. The target audience for this series of presentations would be three groups. 1. Students of MBA HR. 2. Industry practitioners who would like to implement competency-based HRM. And industry practitioners who would like to get the best out of an existing model. Contents. In this presentation, we would be covering what is BEI, purpose of BEI, how does BEI work, credibility of BEI findings, outline of BEI, best practices while administering BEI, coding BEI data, analyzing BEI data, and of course, limitations of BEI. What is behavioral event interview? This is a depth interview technique developed by David McClelland, a professor of psychology at Harvard University, and his colleagues at McBurr and Associates. BEI, like its predecessor CIT, critical incident technique, developed and popularized by Flanagan, uses critical incidents to carry out assessment of competencies. What is the purpose of BEI? The basic purpose of BEI is to capture qualitative data in a quantified form, enabling subsequent statistical analysis. The competency themes are sensed and recorded through the BEI process, and these are qualitative by nature. While analyzing the BEI transcripts, the themes get converted into codes, and then by counting presence, it gets converted to frequency. Statistical tools can then be applied. How does BEI work? BEI works on the premise that the best predictor of future behavior is the past behavior. Thus, BEI attempts to uncover the past performance by asking open-ended questions that require the interviewee to describe in detail past experiences, which in turn demonstrate their ability. Superior and average performers are interviewed using the behavioral event interview technique. Credibility of BEI findings. The basic reason why BEI is used for competency assessment is that what people think or say about their motives or skills is not credible. Only what they actually do in the most critical situations that they have faced is to be believed. The purpose of the BEI method is to get behind what people say they do to actually what they did. The data, therefore, is likely to be highly credible. BEI outline. BEI involves 5 steps. The steps are as follows. A. Introduction and explanation. In this step, the interviewer introduces himself and then explains that the purpose of the interview is to find out what it takes to do the job that the interviewee does. The process would involve discussing, in strict confidence, of course, certain job related incidents which would give a clear idea about the requirements of the job. B. Job responsibilities. In this step, the interviewer gets the interviewee to explain his or her most important job tasks and responsibilities. BI outline continued. C. Behavioral events. The interviewee is asked to describe in detail 3 high points or major successes and 3 low points or key failures. It is customary to start with the high points. The STAR technique is put to use for framing the questions. S in STAR stands for situation. What was the situation? What events led to it? Who were involved? T for task. What did you want to do? How were you feeling then? A for action. What did you actually do? And R for result. What was the result? BI outline continued. D. Characteristics needed to do the job. In this step, the interviewer asks the interviewee his or her opinion about what it takes to do the job. E. Conclusion. The interview normally ends with the interviewer thanking the interviewee for the time. Best practices while administering BEI. Preparation. The success of BEI depends on careful preparation, which would include requisitioning a room, reading relevant background information about the subject, and rehearsing the questions to be asked. Explanation of purpose should be done right at the beginning to arrest apprehension and give the interviewee a feeling of comfort. Seeking permission before recording the interview. This would further reinforce the feeling of comfort. Restating of confidentiality. This would also lead to the same result. Coding BEI data. The BEI data would have to be coded by multiple coders to limit subjectivity. The BEI transcript would have to be read carefully to identify underlying competency themes. These areas would have to be underlined. Using a competency dictionary, the underlying parts of the transcript would have to be matched onto competency descriptions given in the dictionary. Where this match is established, the transcript is said to be coded for that competency. Where the underlying part does not match the description in the dictionary, a new code would have to be generated. The number of times the competency is identified is the frequency. Usually it is taken as a maximum of 1 per story. Analyzing BEI data. Now that we have coded the data, we can proceed to analyze. While there could be different approaches to analyzing the coded data, one approach could be simply to consider presence and absence of a competency theme amongst two groups, exemplary and adequate, demarcated by a definite set of criteria. Then the data could be subjected to a test of significance to determine whether there is a relationship between being exemplary and displaying the competency. Limitations of BEI. Dependence on recall of the respondent. The information elicited depends on the recall of the respondent. This is often a limitation. Suitable only for behavioral competencies, cannot be used for mapping technical competencies. Quality of interpretation depends on the coder. There is a fair amount of subjectivity that gets induced. The quality of interpretation depends on the skill level of the rater or raters. BEI is expensive. The interviews not only require skilled interviewers, but the process takes time. Summary. In this presentation, we have covered what is BEI, purpose of BEI, how does BEI work, credibility of BEI findings, outline of BEI, best practices while administering BEI, coding BEI data, analyzing BEI data, and limitations of BEI. Thank you for watching. If you found the video to be useful, do like, share and subscribe. Press the bell icon to stay tuned in for the next in the series of 8 videos. Our next video is Principal Approaches to Assessing Competencies. Until then, goodbye.